Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you. Ganesh, a great pleasure having you with us. Thank you so much for putting this panel together. I'd like to welcome Mr. Rajiv Kumar, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology Ministry, Ms. Anu, Lead Partner, McKinsey Global Institute, Mr. Deepak Garg, Founder and CEO, RIVIGO, Dr. Ajay Garg, Director, Ministry of Information and Technology, uh, Mr. Rajesh Nambiar, Chairman and President, CIENA, India, Mr. Partha DeSarkar, Executive Director and Global CEO, Hinduja Global Solutions Limited, Mr. Ajay Mehta, Vice President, APAC in India Region, HMD Global, and Mr. Vijay Thadani, Vice Chairman and Managing Director, NIIT Limited. Wow, it's quite a stellar lineup. Thank you all for joining us. But before we go forward, I have great pleasure in introducing Mr. Sanjay Kirloskar, President of AIMA, who will make the opening remarks. Over to you, Mr. Kirloskar.
Thank you. Thank you, Rekha. Yeah, we really have some great panelists. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Rajiv Kumar and other panelists, Ganesh, Rekha, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have all of you with us today and a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us for this CEO's Roundtable on Making India a $1 trillion digital economy. Ganesh, many thanks for taking the initiative of putting this roundtable together. We are delighted to have these distinguished CEOs who've also agreed to participate in today's discussion. Thank you all for accepting our invitation and joining this panel. This roundtable is a part of AIMA's sustained effort to help India's management fraternity cope with the destabilizing impact of the COVID pandemic. AIMA reaches business leaders, executives, management students across the country and has 38,000 institutional and individual members through 68 local management associations. Staying true to its mandate of bringing the latest thoughts and trends to management practitioners, AIMA has quickly adapted to the new normal, the lockdown situation, with the introduction of several new and innovative digital solutions. We have just introduced remote proctored internet-based tests for AIMA's flagship management aptitude test, which is MAT. Candidates now have the option of giving this test online from home, which will be remotely proctored through AI-based tools and human proctors. Remote proctoring will also be extended to many of AIMA's other offerings, including its blended learning programs, events, and recruitment tests. AIMA has also recently launched its Leader Speak series, a series of webinars with thought leaders, including industry captains, ministers, and bureaucrats on topical themes and subjects. This series took off to a flying start and has been very well received. And I'm very happy to state that over 500 to 600 participants join each session. Another unique one-day online program called Business Unusual Series is slated to start in the next few days. These programs will be digitally conducted and will focus on providing mentorship and guidance from leading experts over various sessions. In addition, several online programs, webinars, workshops, trainings, and courses were also conducted for professionals as well as students. AIMA will always be there to help stakeholders in India's management ecosystem under any and all circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, this COVID crisis has accelerated the shift to a digital way of doing business, and Indian enterprises have surprised themselves with their agility. Lockdowns, social distancing, and health concerns are likely to persist until this pandemic is cured, and I don't see a cure for it very quickly. And therefore, digital is the way to ensure business continuity. COVID can be credited for this big push towards digitization, as lockdowns have forced people to buy and sell all kinds of goods and services online that they otherwise would just not do. Regular schools and colleges are running online. Doctors are consulting online. Mom and pop stores are taking orders online for home delivery. And of course, business meetings and conferences are also happening online. Today, in my own company, we had a webinar with over 150 of our dealers, which normally we would have done with everyone's physical presence. So as people get used to doing business online, a lot of output of the physical economy will shift to the digital economy. However, the potential of India's digital economy depends on the speed, reliability, and affordability of data connectivity. Large parts of India still run on dated networks, and many areas have only patchy coverage. Even in the big cities with 4G connectivity, the actual speeds rarely measure up to the billing. 5G technology holds great promise, but India would still need effective standards regulation and vibrant competition in the telecom sector. India also needs to have at least two-thirds of its population use smartphones instead of the one-third currently to make this leap into the digital future. The potential of the digital economy can only be unlocked by unleashing innovation in digital infrastructure and user devices. We're privileged to have an outstanding panel to help us appreciate the importance of digitization of business and how India's digital economy could hit the $1 trillion mark sooner than later. With that, I will conclude and I'll request Ganesh to take over from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sanjay, and a very good evening to all of you. And pleasure to have so many people on this session, both on Zoom and on the other channels of All India Management Association. I've been active in the All India Management Association for the last 10 years, and it's always a breath of fresh air because the diversity of topics that people like Mr. Sanjay Kirloskar, Rekha Sethi, who's our Director General, and the galaxy of leaders who form the council bring together is absolutely amazing because it gives you the width and depth that you need to be a citizen of this country. I still remember 2008, I was chairman of NASSCOM, and that was the time, as you know, the subprime crisis broke. And I was in New York speaking to a battery of analysts in Wall Street. And they were saying, look, the whole world is going to decline 2-3% this year. How do you, as representing the information technology industry in India, how do you react to that? And I said, look, guys, I'll stick my neck out. I still think we will grow 3 to 4% because the IT industry in India has tremendous resilience. And I was fortunate because that year we did grow 3.8%. And we proved that despite all the odds, it was possible. So why did we think of doing this $1 trillion Digital India panel today? Because there is such despondency all around. I mean, if you switch on any television channel, all you get is bad news. And we said it's important to remember that there are some pillars which will take us forward regardless of what happens. We are all hopeful that the $5 trillion GDP that we're talking about will happen. Clearly, it cannot happen in 2024 because this year we do expect a decline in the GDP. Whatever numbers you choose between 0 and 5%, it doesn't matter. And it will take at least a couple of years to get back to a respectable growth because this is, as Sanjay was saying, slightly longer term than we probably would like to imagine. But we do believe, and I was talking to my friend Anu Madgavkar, who is the person who will present the McKinsey research. And I was talking to him, and we really believe that nothing has gone wrong with the digital economy. For instance, and Sanjay mentioned a few examples, but if you look at our path-breaking innovations like Aadhaar, like UPI, the India Stack, and so on and so forth, it gives us great hope that a lot can still happen. So the reason for the next 55 minutes is to dig deeper into that. And the way we structure the session is we'll have Anu actually presenting a few slides from some outstanding McKinsey research that I was privileged to be a part of, along with McKinsey Global Institute, and of course, the Ministry of Electronics and IT. So Anu will talk for maybe about 10 minutes and present the research so that all of you are aware of what is this $1 trillion economy or digital India we're talking about. Obviously, it's not just the IT industry, it's a lot more than that. Who are the participants, who are the players who are to come together to make that happen? And then we will start digging into what we call the pathways to the $1 trillion Digital India. So I'll request Joint Secretary of MeitY, Shri Rajiv Kumar, to give his comments. And then we've actually very carefully chosen CEOs from very different segments. And as we go along, I'll explain why each segment is extremely important. So we'll get comments from each one of them. Also Dr. Garg, who's a director in MeitY. And this will take about maybe 40-45 minutes. Still gives us 15 minutes for any questions you may have. So feel free to shoot your questions on the chat line. And between me and Sanjay of AIMA, we'll make sure that we try and handle as many as possible. So thank you very much. And with that, over to you, Anu, for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Ganesh, for the introduction, and thank you to AIMA, Sanjay, Rekha, and others for actually inviting McKinsey to this roundtable and giving us an opportunity to actually share this research. If you give me a second, I will try and figure out how to put this on slideshow format.
Just go to share screen first.
Yeah. Can you, so can you see my?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, sorry, just give me a second. So while I get it up, just a couple of seconds of context about this piece of work that we did. You know, today in the context of COVID and all of the digital connections that we are actually seeing, it is tempting to kind of believe in this future of the digital economy, but the foundations for this were actually laid, you know, in over several years, I should say. And in many ways, India has been at the forefront now for quite some time. And there was foresight in this piece of research that we actually conducted a year or so ago. This was a very collaborative effort between the Ministry of Electronics and IT and McKinsey. But in addition to the government and McKinsey, we had a sort of council of more than more than 30 business leaders across various sectors, cutting across both the tech industry as well as the you know, the more traditional non-tech or non-digital industry. So this was a collaborative effort comprising of a number of us, therefore. And sorry, give me, I still don't, do you see the presentation screen?
No, you don't. I think you have to go into Zoom, use share screen, and you should have minimized your PowerPoint at that time. And then you can see it.
Okay, hold on a second then. The trouble is I don't see the window here. I see other windows.
Just put your video on, Anu, and just talk us through it. Don't worry about the presentation.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay, I see it now.
Yes, now it should work. Yes, perfect.
Yeah, and yeah. Okay, let me just, yeah. Okay, so I think this is good now.
Perfect.
Okay, so I think the first thing to note is that as we looked at the sheer scale of digital reach in India, what was very clear is that if you look at India versus a large number of countries, on many dimensions, India was already sort of either a leading economy or amongst the top few economies in terms of just the scale of digital access, right, that people were getting. So whether you look at the 1.3 billion people with unique digital ID, this is clearly something which is exceptional, and India is a leading sort of global presence in terms of just the scale of the Aadhaar program and the number of people who can actually use digital identity today. If you look at the number of internet subscriptions and smartphone devices, again, we would be amongst, just in terms of the number, we would be amongst the top, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 economies in the world. But then even beyond that, if you think about things like the cost, right, of data and the levels to which it's crashed, India is a leading economy in terms of just cheapness and affordability. If you look at the level of usage of actual data consumption per data subscriber, at 10.4 gigabits a month, we are again amongst the leading economies, right? So the consumer is ready. the access has been created. And the question now is really how we forge ahead. So we also looked at digital adoption in terms of momentum. And what we found is, if you compare India to about 20 other economies, a mix of emerging economies as well as developed economies, what we found is that the digital adoption pace across a whole range of different metrics that we then combined into a score, but that score advanced the fastest for India, virtually compared to any other country. Indonesia was a little bit faster, but compared to many other countries, just the pace of movement across the last 3 or 4 years was actually the fastest in India. So not only the largest, but also the fastest growing in many ways. Now, what is kind of special about India's digital footprint is that it is reaching parts of the country which even traditional infrastructure or traditional channels have struggled to reach. In that sense, it's been extremely sort of inclusive. What this shows us is the states which are highlighted are actually the ones which showed the fastest growth in internet adoption and or the penetration of digital kiosks or common service centers, which provide digital services right down to remote villages. For all of us who know India, it's very clear that the heartland of India, which has struggled actually to access traditional infrastructure, is leaping ahead in terms of digital access through a combination of personal devices as well as these digital kiosks or common service centers. And almost half of the incremental growth in internet subscription actually came from states that are poorer, that have relatively low per capita income or per capita GDP, which again signifies that there is a whole new class of consumers and a whole new class of subscribers and users of digital access, which are coming on stream and can in fact be reached. Assuming that this momentum continues, as I think folks have fully expect that with COVID, this momentum may actually accelerate. But even without that, we would expect, therefore, to be a real explosion in both the number of devices, reaching maybe 800 to 900 million devices, the share of digital transactions to grow 10 times, for example, and then the sheer amount of data that exists in the economy or in India would actually grow something like 60 times between 2018 and 2025. So it's an exponential growth just in usage and therefore data. Now, what has that meant? Even before COVID-19, this has actually meant a sort of triple whammy, if you will, sort of a triple, 3 sets of engines firing just in terms of innovation. And India is again quite unique in that you have, the government as a sector or a set of entities that are innovating very rapidly and using digital to almost lead disruption in a very positive way across many sectors. Second thing is that you have, of course, an explosion of the digital natives and startups who are building businesses as digital first businesses. And then what's also most interesting in India is that traditional incumbents in businesses across sectors are also embracing digital and making themselves sort of, or parts of their organization start looking like digital first businesses, right? So across the first three examples here are all in the government domain, whether it's the trillions of UPI transactions, the fact that you have businesses as well as individuals now with key financial data on online platforms like GSTN, or really interesting, the fact that we have 200 million plus soil health cards and almost that number of farmers who are transacting on electronic marketplaces in agriculture, right? So most non-traditional digital applications of that kind led by the government. In startups across the spectrum, but I think sectors like, again, logistics and farm advisory, scaling to a level that is quite dramatic, that was unimaginable a few years ago. And then finally, these notions of big, large incumbent companies, the last few examples on the page, which says that there are digital and analytics transformation programs being run across 100,000 employee strong organization. So think about multiple points of sales, service, production, etc., all being digitized. or a generations old company actually building the most successful digital businesses in their domain, and similarly in healthcare. So multiple sets of innovation being seen. And this goes beyond sort of creating pure consumer reach or consumer utility. What we found when we looked at many of these examples is that there is evidence on the ground of real productivity increase being captured by these kinds of digital innovations. So whether in plants and factories, 30 to 40% reduction in operating cost, or 10 to 15% reduction in supply chain costs, right? Or if you think about, again, the farm sector, the fact that farmers actually have captured 10 to 15% better value through electronic marketplaces, higher yields, and then even in education, the fact that pass rates and learning levels have been shown to improve through digital content delivery. So real productivity increases, whether reducing cost or increasing output for the same level of resources, are actually being seen on the ground and are proving to be a very powerful motivation, not just for individual innovation, but ultimately for the trillion-dollar economy. Because the way we think about it is that today, or let's say in 2018, the size of India's digital economy comprising what activities are traditionally part of the digital economy, that would be about 200 billion US. These themselves can scale up to about $500 billion. Say by 2025, that might be a year earlier or a year later, depending on COVID's impact, which is both negative and positive for the digital economy. But the traditional activities can scale up $500 billion. And then new and emerging digital ecosystems across all those areas that include financial services, supply chains, manufacturing, logistics, farming, and so on, can add another $500 billion. Which would amount to the $1 trillion, not just of top line or revenue, that's not how we thought about it, but real productivity, real GDP enhancing activities that could actually come out of digital applications. Now, most people would wonder what that meant for work, because digital innovation fundamentally transforms work. And what we found is that, yes, indeed, on the back of this digital economy, some 40 million people we think would need to be reskilled. They would need to be trained in functional digital skills. And some of them may actually need to find new kinds of work because new kinds of jobs will be in demand. But against that number, this whole productivity gain of $1 trillion can actually support 60 to 65 million jobs. These jobs of the future, many of them, as I said, might be for high-skilled workers. Many of them might actually be for middle or lower-skilled workers who learn how to work with tools that are in turn enabled by automation. So net-net, there would be job gain if the right kinds of interventions are brought in place to reskill and redeploy people who have to adjust, because fundamentally adjustment is going to be a must.
Yeah, Anu,
give you a very quick flavor. Lots and lots.
We just have a couple of minutes.
Yeah. I'm not going to talk through details of the kinds of opportunities. It suffices to say that these are all transformational for the sectors from which they come, whether it's healthcare, education, agriculture, the whole manufacturing sector, the whole business of skilling people and finding jobs for them and matching them. Some of the e-governance of the future that you see on the left-hand side, some of these are very, very foundational innovations that can raise efficiency levels throughout the economy. For example, the National Document and Data Exchange. The more we can enable paperless exchanges of all kinds of information, the more efficiency levels rise throughout the economy. In financial services, flow-based lending, for example, and credit underwriting on the back of data, that can have transformational effects. So there is a whole range of innovations and applications across all sectors. And what can sort of spur a lot of this is the notion of digital platforms may be enabled by government action, may be enabled by private sector action, but which aggregate data and then on an API, open API basis, make it available to all sorts of innovation and all sorts of entities to use that data with, of course, the right data protection safeguards. I'll close with this idea. I think this was very key to the way we thought about it, the way the ministry actually thought about it, which is that it's not one or two entities alone that can make this vision real. This will need action by the nodal ministry, but also by other central ministries, crucially by state governments who want to innovate as well, and regulators who need to allow space for innovation. And then on the right-hand side, it's a whole range of innovators, as I said, across the infrastructure and IT providers, businesses, startups, and so on. So with that, let me stop here. Happy to take questions and hand over back to Ganesh. We will hear a lot about how to actualize this, some of the opportunities and challenges on that side. Thanks, Ganesh.
Thank you very much, Anu. That was I know that a lot of people have been asking questions saying, can we access the presentation? All you have to do is send $1 million to McKinsey, and I'm sure Anu will mail you that, so not a problem. But we'll come back to you on giving you more information from the presentation that you need. Let me just preface the invite to the Joint Secretary by saying, I think our entire $160, $180 billion industry owes a lot to the support from the government. I mean, many of you may be aware that before the Ministry of Electronics and IT was formed, it was called the Department of Electronics. And it was a very visionary scheme called the Software Technology Parks of India, which was introduced by the then secretary, which actually spurred many of us who were just starting companies in the digital economy to grow to the level that we have seen. So I think it's been a fantastic partnership. So may I request Joint Secretary Shri Rajiv Kumar to give his comments on the pathways to how do we make the $1 trillion digital economy, Digital India happen.
Thank you, Ganesh ji. Thank you so much. I hope I'm audible to the participants.
Yes, sir.
Oh, great. And let me also thank AIMA, Mr. Kirloskar and Anu for taking us through the $1 million presentation, $1 trillion presentation. I think the work that was done by McKinsey for Ministry of Electronics has tremendous value, and we would certainly be guided by the great amount of value addition that has gone into this work. It's indeed also a pleasure for me to be connected to the CEOs who are on the listening mode, and grateful to AIMA to give me this medium. This COVID pandemic is indeed an unprecedented challenge for us. At least in our lifetime, I have never seen something, most of us wouldn't have seen something like this. It's not only a health crisis, it's a crisis which traverses various domains. It's a social crisis, it's an economic crisis, and so on and so forth. And there is massive deprivation, disruption, and a lot of unemployment. And the greater you watch TV, the more you realize that the amount of disruption that has happened in our lives. Coming to the digitalization part, I think first, since Anu has taken us through the various facets of what constitutes the digital economy and how India is making a progress towards $1 trillion by 2025. But let me point out just one very important figure. Ganesh mentioned about the STP scheme, and now 3 decades later, when we are known as the back office of the world, once the first lockdown was announced on beginning March 25, the IT industry, which services the world, managed to continue to render their services with just 1 to 2% attendance in offices, and BPM employees also less than 5%. Today also, after we have seen a lot of easing of curves, we are still down to only 10% attendance in offices, but the services have largely continued uninterrupted, both domestic as well as internationally. So that's the amount of uh, hard work that our employees have put in, the IT industry has put in by working from their homes and utilizing the digital opportunities that this pandemic has thrown. We should, these are our also, we may call as our frontline, maybe not the COVID warriors, but they are also, our IT warriors who have really worked very hard to continue to deliver services. Uh, the McKinsey report, when it came, we hadn't actually encountered COVID-19 crisis. So there are certain assumptions there, and however, with the coming of this crisis, a lot of churning has happened, and there would be a lot of things that actually we were not thinking in terms of very high priority when this report was being written, but now will actually emerge as perhaps the most important piece or important pieces and maybe higher on priority. Uh, Let me just highlight some of these. So perhaps one of the biggest contributor to overcoming the pandemic and a digital offering would be Arogya Setu. Right? Similarly, the government's own training mechanism called IGOT has, got completely online, and massive amount of training programs have been run, particularly for the health professionals, frontline warriors, sanitation workers, and second responders, as we continue to face the crisis in terms of first responders, requiring rest and quarantine themselves. So tremendous amount of courses and tremendous amount of interest has occurred in the government's own online courses. So this is the kind of opportunities that this particular crisis has created. If we look at the delivery models, uh, everyone is now looking at collaboration tools, work from home solutions, teleworking, and many of these solutions uh, are now rapidly scaling up in terms of being as standalone software products or continued service or software as a service. So this has garnered great attention. EduTech has also jumped very high on priority and maybe would become something which will be mainstreamed in the way we learn and we seek education in our schools and colleges. However, we have in EduTech also, we have just uh, uh, scratched the surface uh, because most of the schools and colleges which are municipal in nature, which are in rural areas, have still not benefited. Though the government started with the scheme of Swayam Prabha and allocated around 32 DTH channels, but they still don't have the internet connectivity, and most of new education would happen through internet and not through recorded lectures. So there is a great opportunity for edutech people working in edutech space to take over this, and there's a huge market both in terms of selling to government as well as being responsible, bringing responsible social solutions to our societal problems. I see great traction for cybersecurity products. As soon as we went into lockdown, the number of cases of phishing, wishing, malware have tremendously increased. And if you look at the ICERT advisories, uh, there are, in fact, the number of cases of incidences in India has increased by around 50%. So I see a great need for cybersecurity product companies now to do well in the digital domains. Uh, Now, if we look at operationalizing this particular report, Anu talked about that there are lot of options before us, lot of opportunities before us, and I have tried to list out these opportunities in terms of how we have what has been our journey in terms of say Aadhaar, Jam Trinity, and famously now being called as India Stack. But now we need to move on beyond India Stack, which has comprised of a few layers, to actually move towards utilizing the India Stack into other domains which are very critical, like for example, the National Digital Health Mission, which is now slated to come up. So again, open API based will allow private players to develop their software products around the core digital standards and deliver values. Similarly, the next one would be on agriculture, followed by education. So we have already lot of products and lot of applications already developed in agriculture. Now to tie them up, bring them on a platform, soil health card is there. There are various fumigation schedules. There are various e-commerce linkages there, eNAM, and also the recent announcement regarding dilution of APMC Act and allowing the private, the farmers to sell directly to any mandi or to anyone in this country. So there are a lot of opportunities even around the government sector. The traditional in the traditional sector, agriculture, education, and health. These are prime platforms now coming up, and they would certainly form what is now being famously called as the national open digital ecosystem, by way of providing open APIs, scalable, secular, based upon scalable, secular, and modular architecture. A few things for our industry CEOs. We would, and they actually would backstop the progress towards our trillion-dollar digital opportunity. One is MSMEs have actually to contribute tremendously in our journey. And herein we would request the bigger companies also. India desperately needs rupee capital, and traditionally we have been supported by the VCs which have brought in foreign capital, but we do have rupee capital with our companies with good cash reserves, and many of them in IT sector also. So this is the time to actually support the MSMEs to come up with smart software products, solutions, even for government procurement, for commercial use, and even for our societal challenges. Electronic manufacturing, government has announced, just as the pandemic was upon us, 3 major schemes in electronic manufacturing, and so we need CEO support, whosoever are in electronic manufacturing, to actually look at the various incentive packages that are now being offered to sharpen electronic manufacturing. One thing this pandemic has made us realize is that the so-called very famous and lubricated global supply chains have faced tremendous challenges. I would rather go into to the extent and say that we have actually looked at failures of global supply chains, but then even if it is not failures, we have had tremendous challenges, and so we need to build our in-house capacity, and that is why electronic manufacturing is something which we really need to look at. And India is tremendously good at embedded software, so this is a great opportunity. one of important things that will now also come up is actually, if we look at edutech, financial, fintech, and of course medtech, which has also jumped very high in terms of teleconsultations and various other offerings during this crisis, and will continue. This is something herein we need to have even greater amount of innovation coming in through use of AR, VR, robotics, which will actually deepen digitalization and unlock greater value. On its part, and I'm now coming to my closing remarks, is that on its part, we at MeitY have also put out a few things for industries to actually come and participate in this digitalization opportunity. So you would have heard about challenge being run to find for India, for the government, a good VC solution. We also have come up recently with other grand challenges. Typically now, once we have is for work from home solutions. There is the electronic manufacturing schemes, and then next generation incubation scheme, which is targeting actually tier 2 and tier 3 cities in various locations of STPI. And of course, we do have our own centers of excellence, wherein a lot of you are already involved and partnering with MeitY. So we look forward to your continued support, and I look forward to the further discussion by the esteemed panel. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Rajiv ji. I think that was really, truly excellent. And you're absolutely right. I think there are so many opportunities that MeitY is now put in front of entrepreneurs as well as industry. We're truly delighted. I mean, just as one data point, when we requested support from the telecom authorities to make sure that people could work from home, it was literally granted in a few hours. So I think that kind of dynamism is what can make this $1 trillion dream. So now we'll very quickly move to the CEO comments. And I'm going to start with Partha DeSarkar. Partha DeSarkar is CEO of Hinduja Global. I mean, they have more than 40,000 employees, 7 countries. And literally, as Shri Rajiv Kumar said, they were up and running within a week with 85% production. So I'm going to request Partha to offer his comments, and then we'll move to Rajesh Nambiar. Partha, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Ganesh, and thank you, AIMA, for giving me the opportunity to speak. Good evening, everybody. It was brilliant to hear Anu and Mr. Rajiv Kumar speak, and the vision is so grand. I'm just going to keep my comments to the narrow focus of the industry that I come from, which is the BPM industry, and give some numbers. We started in 2000, let's say, and it's 20 years of this industry. So with a 1.5 billion turnover, it used to employ only about 155,000 people. Today, it employs 1.3 million people in India and 38 billion revenues. So this industry is going to be fairly key to support the 1 trillion growth that we're looking for in the subject of discussion. Clearly, I see on the demand side, artificial intelligence, analytics, and IoT are the 3 main drivers that will drive demand. And there are literally explosion of possibilities possible through Indian thought leadership. And also with the collaboration with US, Europe, and countries in the East Asia. So I think collaboration of these countries to bring thought leadership in AI, analytics, and IoT is going to drive demand. Broader technology partnerships, and also in manufacturing space, as was mentioned, the supply chains have been disrupted. I think India stands a great chance to now come up as a replacement of China to be the part of the global supply chain. So far as supply side is concerned, when I talk about AI, analytics, and IoT, there is obviously a need for reskilling a large part of India in these new emerging technologies. And Anu did talk about 40 million people that she believes needs to be reskilled to take care of this opportunity. I agree with that number. That's clearly going to be a big part of helping India scale digital. Curriculum in colleges need to change to adapt to this new demand for new skills. Work from home came up. That's actually been a game changer so far as this COVID crisis has been concerned, to enable us to keep the lights on. And I want to thank MeitY for giving us the license to, the OSP license and relaxation to enable that. But I think this is something that we need to look upon as more the norm, that we enable work from home through technology and connectivity. So from that perspective, broadband connectivity, 5G connectivity penetration are very, very important for us to be able to scale the supply side, to be enabled to enable the workforce from tier 2 and tier 3 cities to contribute to this opportunity. The gig economy consists of all kinds of people. There are students, part-timers who don't want to work the full 8 hours. There are people who want to work for 3 companies at the same time, probably work 2-3 hours for this, for 2-3 hours for that. A lot of flexibility is required. So therefore, the current laws, the shops and establishments laws will have to be changed to make sure that the knowledge workers who's going to participate in a big way in this trillion-dollar economy are enabled by laws that support flexible working. Housewives can come in, people with disabilities can come in this work from home, if this work from home becomes a new norm, and it, I think, has to become the new norm. Redesigning of co-working spaces, hub and spoke models. Today, we've got huge brick and mortar footprints. I don't think we need that going forward. If we can build hub and spoke models, where essentially every neighborhood has an office, a co-working space. So Koramangala has one, Indranagar has one, Jayanagar has one. People don't necessarily have to commute to work. They can just walk to work if they don't have the infrastructure at home to be able to work. So these are some of the ideas that I think will enable us to contribute to the trillion-dollar economy. Work from home is a very important aspect of enabling this, and to be able to reskill people to grab the opportunities given by AI, IoT, and analytics. These would be some of the key drivers, Ganesh, that I think will help us leapfrog to the trillion-dollar economy.
So Partha, let me put you on the spot. Do you think our industry, the IT and BPO services and everything else, can that scale to the 450, 400 billion that we're talking about?
See, we scaled from a billion to 38 billion in 20 years. And I think there is a scale multiplier that can happen, right? I think we can, but a lot of things need to fall in place. One, we need to get out of the trouble that all of us are in, the economy is in right now. The economy has to be pump prime to be able to get demand going.
True. Yeah, I think we're all waiting for that to happen. Let's see.
I think
folks,
just goes after that.
Just in case anybody is looking at your watch, AIMA has kindly consented to give us a 15-minute extension. So we'll go until 5:15. Hope that's okay with all of you. Now, let me move quickly to digital infrastructure. Because as all of us know, and I think we're all waiting for the day when every villager in any part of the country can have access to 100 Mbps, irrespective of which Gram Panchayat you belong to. So I think that'll be great. And obviously the core to this is the National Optical Fiber Network, the BharatNet, et cetera, et cetera. And here's one person whom I know extremely well and who is actually heading CIENA networks in India. So Rajesh, what do you think? I mean, what does it need to really prop up the digital infrastructure to make the trillion-dollar economy happen?
Thank you, Ganesh. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Look, lots have been said about what Digital India is and what we need to get done. But I think when it comes to looking at what really will enable the digital India vision, if you may, is all of us know that it is the digital infrastructure and digital platform. I mean, if you don't have a platform, you can't ride the train on it. So you got to build those platforms very, very well. Whether it is an enabler of an IoT type of activity or anything that you want to do digitally, if you don't have the right level of platform. The platform has got multiple things which needs to be put together. We as a country, we need to build that over a period of time. The same way we would have done physical infrastructure with the roads and railroads and whatnot. It's important for us to build the right level of networking. Connectivity, in my mind, is almost a lifeline in many ways. And you would have seen it in this COVID-19 situation. That has been the most important thing for all of us, right? I mean, we can live without many things, but we cannot live without connectivity. So the digital infrastructure in my mind consists of several things, and we talked about network and the importance of connectivity. Data was the second one, right? Do you really have the right level of metadata, and then data about what is going on? And then I think Anu mentioned about this explosion of a data ecosystem, which is fantastic as long as we have a bit of a management over those data, and then enabling and protocol standardization, etc., becomes very key to form that digital infrastructure. Devices and storage and servers and whatnot, I mean, all of them will form a very key of those digital infrastructure, cloud being the way to go. And then you'll also find that this infrastructure needs to have a lot of collaboration between the communication service providers, the OTT players, the web scalers, digital service providers, of course, the hardware manufacturers and equipment makers. So it's a very an effort which has to be put together by government, citizen, and the businesses alike. And actually kind of shapes up those digital ecosystem as well. And why is it important? I think the digital ecosystem, there are several examples, right? And how do you really reshape the consumer to producer behavior or interactions? And I was very intrigued by, I hope Deepak is going to talk about it, and they have this RIVIGO company which has done this relay drivers and so on and so forth. So the whole consumer to producer ecosystem changes significantly, right? And that's what I think we believe will change the world. And I won't take much time. I just want to say the impediments, if you really see what is going to stop us from getting there, purely from a communications point of view, and how do we, there's a lot of ask from creating a conducive environment for investment onto technology and network. That's, of course, all of us know. The second one is around the spectrum. How do we really use or auction those radio frequency spectrum across the board? Adequate quantity, the right pricing, etc., becomes a big deal. Fiber connectivity, as all of us know, India today has roughly about 20 to 25% at best in terms of fiber connectivity, whereas most developed countries will have 70% upwards in terms of fiber connectivity. How do you take it from 20 to 70 by 2024 or whatever the number that we want to look at? Then, of course, there are a lot of issues around the right of way, licensing equations, AGR, all of you are familiar with. All of these, we need to have a bit of a telecom reform, if you may, from a connectivity point of view. I think that will help smoothen all of that. With that, when you look at a billion digital identities, a billion mobile devices or some kind of devices all over the place, of course, many can be smart devices. I have no doubt that the revolution has begun. It's a question of how do you take it forward and then get to our goals that we are defining for ourselves. So with that, let me turn it back to Ganesh.
Thank you very much, Rajesh, for that note of great optimism. 20 to 70 is a task, but I'm sure we can make that happen.
It is. Thank you.
To what I think is a most significant case study of the other 550 billion, which is RIVIGO. And Deepak, can I request you to add your comments?
Sure. Thank you, Ganesh. Thank you, AIMA. Thank you, MeitY, for having me here on the panel. I hope I'm audible and people can hear me clearly.
Little louder, Deepak.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for having me here, everyone. Good evening, everyone. So just a brief intro, a short intro about RIVIGO. RIVIGO is a tech logistics company. We follow relay trucking model to make lives of drivers much better. And in turn, it improves the efficiency of the truck and reduces the delivery time for our customers. I hear a lot of talk these days about supply chain, and it's a matter of pride for companies like us that supply chain is the center of conversation. Right from the speech of Honorable Prime Minister, where he used the word supply chain 5 times 2 weeks ago. Now everyone is talking about supply chain and how to make supply chains more resilient using technology. So I'm going to share a few ideas. I think, overall, COVID has actually expedited the infusion of technology in logistics and supply chain manifold. It's been those weeks, if I have to quote Lenin, where decades are happening in the world of supply chain and technology. To overall characterize the problem of logistics, we are about 14% of GDP, and all of it is in fact inefficiency. All logistics is inefficiency. It should be lower and lower. And for US and many other developed markets, the number is about 7 to 8 to 9%. But when you go deep down into the US numbers, you realize the 7% that they spend on logistics, 50% of that 7% is actually spent on technology and IT. you'd be surprised to hear that FedEx and UPS individually employed more IT engineers than Microsoft till about a few years ago. I don't know the latest numbers, but till about a few years ago, they individually employed more engineers than Microsoft. So they the US companies spend a lot on IT and technology, and that's why that spend has overall led US to move from 18% cost of logistics in 1988 to now 7 or 8%. So technology is going to be imperative if we have to make logistics efficient in India, if we have to make supply chains more resilient in India, and if we have to, what I call release at a $5 trillion scale, $300 to $350 billion of hidden treasure in our supply chains. Where is this hidden treasure?
Did we lose Deepak?
Yeah, I think we lost Deepak.
Maybe we'll come back to Deepak. So if you folks don't mind, we'll move straight to Mr. Vijay Thadani. Vijay, of course, was my boss when I was working in NIIT. So Vijay, your thoughts, sir, as the skills czar of this country.
Thank you, Ganesh, and thank you for having me. I think we've talked a lot about the COVID and the pandemic, but I think I would just like to bring 4 or 5, in my opinion, very important points. One is that the power of digital technologies, on which there were a few believers, there were a lot of naysayers, and then there were a whole lot of fence sitters. I think now everybody is the believer. So the positive side of COVID has been that you don't have to explain the why digital technologies can help, but now the discussion is on how and how fast and how effective. And I think for that to happen, you touched upon education. Many of you touched upon education. Anu's slides also talked about education. But I think we look at education as one of the applications which is there of digital technologies. What I would like to forcefully put forward is education has a potential of being a key contributor to the trillion-dollar digital economy. And key contributor not just as an enabler, but key contributor also in the dollar terms. It is a force multiplier by itself, very simply, because it's just not an application of digital technologies. But without that, the rest of whatever infrastructure that we are talking of, we talked about without the rails and the train, there will be no journey. But if there are no passengers, then in any case, you can have the rails and trains and no drivers, then you will have the rails and trains, but still no journey. So I think the important part which we have to notice is that digital India cannot happen without digitally enabled Indians and digitally skilled Indians and digitally skilled teachers. I think these 3 are precursors without which we do not have a starting point. We will have a lot of infrastructure. And I think we are doing lots of things, but lots more can be done. So that was my second point. The third is that digital education is not about putting a Zoom call and getting to see the picture of your teacher. It is a very, very dissatisfying experience for the student. It is not an encouraging and motivating experience. Effectiveness of education is when learner feels motivated to participate in the education, which is what we call learner-centric education. And I think for that effectiveness, we need many, many technologies at work, like AR, VR, like AI, like machine learning, like data sciences that people talked about, analytics. I think all those have to work and have to work in a cohesive and integrated manner to achieve the end result of effective education. Effective education is which delivers the outcomes. The fourth thing which I want to say is this will require a huge amount of research to be done in pedagogies, because the pedagogy that we are used to is the famous chalk and talk. And that has worked its way for the last 2 centuries for us. But that's not the way forward. We've been questioning this for last 30, 40, 50 years, but I don't think that's the way forward. Well, it's not a thinking issue at all. It's just not possible. So if that research has to be done in right pedagogy with the right content and the right set of technology and platforms, then that requires a huge amount of, should I say, national resource and funding. Benefit of that will, of course, be that what we are struggling with is not what only we are struggling with, the whole world is struggling with. You should read articles on how students are denouncing the best of universities, saying, please don't show me a Zoom or Google Meet or the Microsoft Teams lecture. And therefore, I think besides the search for the video conferencing platform, which I do not deny we need one, I think we also need search for a very good education effectiveness enhancing platform for delivery. I have 4 asks from the government, since government is on that, and I will stop at that. Number 1, this technology and this application will not come in research labs, in research institutions. They will come in educational institutions. Government needs to increase the funding that it has for research by higher education by an order of magnitude. They are massively underfunded, number 1. Number 2, there needs to be a flexibility, policy flexibility, which may not be a MeitY area, it is an MHRD area, where we don't create artificial barriers of creating institutions with having A, B, and C only can do. Let everybody try out. Nobody knows the right model and the whole world is struggling for it. So policy flexibility. Third, every other sector has been given a stimulus. Very surprisingly, the word education does not figure in any one of those. And I wonder why. And the fourth, a lot of digital India reality will only happen by government making large-scale buying of infrastructure and services. And that cannot happen with the current contracting methodologies which the government of India has. They need to modernize that, and they need to come up with better systems than what we have. I think the end result of that is that India can not only appear as a great role model for digital education, but I think as a major contributor to the $1 trillion digital economy. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Vijay, for your very timely reminder that ultimately it's education that will build the economy, whether digital or otherwise. I think that's very, very useful. Can I get Ajay, your comments? Because as another enabler to the economy, what do you feel about the whole pathway?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Ganesh, and thank you to AIMA for having me. It's an absolute privilege to speak here. I'll just spend a couple of minutes on the whole hardware piece, because unless there is a hardware in this entire chain, the delivery of the experience is impossible. So as Anu mentioned, we have an internet base of 687 million users, of which 629 actually are accessing it on mobiles. There are close to 500 million smartphone users. But in addition to that, one segment we forget are the feature phone users. There are close to 400 million feature phone users, most of whom are yet to taste the internet. And that is the opportunity that is there in India. So what you will see in the coming months and years is a huge shift of consumers from feature phones to smartphones. As part of the industry, and Nokia included, we are looking to provide low-cost, high-quality, higher quality products in that price band to get the feature phone phone user to switch. We are also looking at financing options. We are working with NBFCs and companies to make the cost of ownership lower. So we could see an exponential rise in the number of people that are getting online over the next few years. The other area I wanted to spend a few minutes was Make in India. Over the last many years, about 4 years, we had the phased manufacturing program that the industry did along with the government, I think, which was a very successful one up to a point. We were able to open almost 270 factories around the country and deliver close to 330 million phones in 2019. Going forward, like Mr. Kumar mentioned, we have three schemes: the production-linked incentive, the scheme for promotion of electronics components and semiconductors, and the electronic manufacturing cluster schemes, all looking to further enhance the Make in India program for mobile devices. Last time that was focused on consumption in India. Now it's focused on exports. In fact, we have an ambitious target of hitting 1 billion phones by 2025, 600 million of which are meant for exports. However, there is still some way to go there. So far, a lot of the manufacturing has been more around assembly. So the gross value add to gross value output has been a little low. I think now we really need to focus under specs to build the component ecosystem in India, which is where the focus will lie. But that requires what I call the 4 I's. And one is incentives. We need incentives from the states to get the industry to establish these component ecosystems. We need the infrastructure. I know there's been a lot of work around that. The EMC work has already kicked off, and there are these large industrial parks that are already afoot. We need the implementation by the states. Every state has a very different level of implementation. We need, the ease of doing business to go up in the states. And in addition to that, of course, the industry needs to take the initiative to bring cutting edge technology and really the latest technology investment in the manufacturing space. Land and labor laws, of course, is something that needs to be looked at as well. And therefore, this whole Make in India piece is really poised for, and somebody mentioned that we can see India as an alternative to China. I think never before have we had that opportunity of really capitalizing on it. And then last but not the least, as Mr. Nambiar mentioned, if you don't have the connectivity, I think everything else falls off. The fiber to the home envisaged by NDCP via 2018 was to cover 50% of the household and provide at least 50 Mbps to every citizen. I think that needs to accelerate. The 5G rollout, we are yet to even do the auctions. And the latest estimate is that Q1 21 is when the auctions are likely to happen and the networks will start to roll out in the second half. We are already 2 years behind because all the healthcare, education, agriculture, all the use cases, consumer IoT, etc., they all require low latency connections. And until 5G really gets off the ground, we're going to have, all that is probably not going to be actualized to its fullest. So in my opinion, I think I'm very positive. I think the $1 trillion economy and the 60 to 65 million odd jobs that it will create is definitely going to happen. 2024, 2025, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So thank you very much again, Ganesh. I hand it back over to you. It was really a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajay. Very nice of you. And Deepak Garg is back. So Deepak, would you like to close out your comments?
Sorry, I lost connection. So I was at this, highlighting this number of $350 billion, right? This is 7% of the 14% we want to shave off in terms of logistics inefficiency, right? At a $5 trillion economy. So I want to lay that number out and say, this can only happen if there is technology in logistics and supply chain. And I've given example of US, who has brought 18% down to 6 to 7%, where 50% of the spend on logistics now happens on IT and technology. Right? 7% of US spend on logistics, half of it is actually in technology. I'll also like to give a few examples of the way technology is penetrating logistics and transportation. I think IoT trucks is a reality as a precursor to driverless trucks. I know we don't believe that driverless trucks will happen in India, but I think the way the technology is emerging, it's not too far away, maybe a decade or two, but I think driver assist or idle trucks are here to kind of stay. We've developed IoT trucks where we can actually take any truck and convert it into a smart truck at a very nominal cost of a 25 paisa per kilometer, which includes tire sensors, which includes engine sensors, which includes, and what it has done is basically made trucking completely safe and pilferage proof. And it has improved the efficiency of the trucks. On all the trucks where we have deployed driver safety cameras, there is not a minor or a major accident. So there are immense amount of benefits of technology in transportation, particularly trucking. Second thing, post-COVID, what we are realizing is every customer of ours is wanting paperless transportation. So e-way bill, ELR, EPOD, online integration, WhatsApp-based integration is the name of the game. I think we have integrated over the last few weeks with 200 large companies our IT solution, and more companies are looking for paperless transportation. Warehouse automation. I was talking to a lot of FMCG companies are not getting, now migrant labor back. They are investing a lot in warehouse automation. It will raise the productivity of our warehouse ecosystem significantly. ERP and transportation, operating systems are again getting hugely popular, and every company is, deploying freight management systems. I did not see this kind of a wave. We have been talking about this since last 6 years, but last few weeks have actually brought this future much closer. I often tell my team, what you imagine will happen in 10 years is going to happen in the next 5 years. And I think everyone is doing their bit. I also work very closely with Department of Logistics, and if you look at the new logistics policy, which is under draft, has immense amount of focus on technology in supply chain, whether it is national logistics platform, whether it is a transport worker app, whether it is goods mobility data stack. There's immense amount of work government is also doing on this front. And as a proud citizen, I should say that I haven't seen benchmarking different economies in different states. I haven't seen this level of proactive technology infusion happening in what do you call a plumbing sector of the country by state and private sector coming together. I think this is hugely encouraging. I close out my thoughts here. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Deepak. As an ex McKinsey guy running a great company, I think that's very promising. And I'm going to, now that we've heard all the CEOs on the round table, I'm going to request Dr. Garg, who's my good friend in MeitY, to close with his thoughts, and then we'll take a couple of questions. Dr. Garg?
Thank you, Ganesh. Thank you, AIMA, for giving me this opportunity. It was great hearing all the esteemed CEOs and their views and their positivity in spite of everything being negative out here in the present circumstances. So when you talk about a $1 trillion economy, my view on this is that the $1 trillion economy is going to happen. And the COVID crisis has accelerated and made it more relevant that this will going to happen. The digital spending will increase, and India being a consumer economy, it will actually make the $1 trillion economy. But the question lies here is whether the value of the $1 trillion economy will come into the Indian ecosystem, or we will just end up being a consumer economy. That is a very important, pertinent question to have to understand. So in this regard, what I'll say is that where India differs from rest of the digital infrastructures that are there globally, there are two examples, one in the West, one in the East. And we all know what are the challenges that lie towards the East. But let's understand what lies towards the West. The Silicon Valley, which has been the key driver of the digital economy for the last 20-25 years, has its own limitations. It's mostly a consumer-driven experience creating creating a market around a non-existent market. That has been the key driver of the digital economy from the Silicon Valley. They have not created low-cost solutions for the bottom of the pyramid. Our public digital platforms, which are low-cost and penetrates the last person on the road, has demonstrated that digital economy can now be a supplier of goods to the rest of the 5.5 billion people in the world, which the Silicon Valley has not been able to address to. That's the advantage that we have. That's the advantage we should actually know. But there lies the challenge. We need to quickly move from services to products and have a self-belief on our own local grown products. The resilience that has been shown by the IT industry, as the Joint Secretary rightly said, quickly moving from mostly working from offices to right now at 90% of them moving to work from home, have demonstrated that if we actually intend to do something, we'll do it. The public digital platforms have been in place. The strong startup ecosystem is already there, which is working day in and day out to create new innovative products. We have a robust IT industry which is there to back them. They are transparent. The problem lies in the only aspect is that how do we create a collaborative network around the government, industry, and the startups, and lastly, the academia, as Vijay rightly said. These are the four pillars of the Indian economy which have to actually come together and take the maximum pie of the $1 trillion digital opportunity. With regards to this collaboration, I will highlight three basic points. First is the market access, whether the market access to be provided by the government or by the private sector or the consumer. Here the question comes of the self-belief. Whether the made in India products, we have a belief in that, we give them a chance through a risk mechanism to actually prove themselves. That is important to understand. The VC challenge, which is a first attempt by the government where we have upfront said that if you come up with a solution, we will ready to provide you the market, government to the market. Let's all understand that all this digital economy is a data-driven economy. The more the data the company has, the stronger will be the solution. The algorithm behind an AI is not important. It is the amount of data which drives that algorithm is important. And we, being the 1.3 billion consumer economy, have the greater advantage towards this data. The other important point that I want to say is that if the data-driven economy is important, then the policy network around the data has to be clear and unambiguous. And the regulators as well as the judiciary has to clearly understand, so that we do not get into the confusion of all these privacy issues and lose this opportunity. We have to be very clear on this issue. The last point that I want to again reiterate, which Rajiv Kumarji said, is that it is important that we have a belief in our young tech entrepreneurs, and the rupee capital moves from the large industry network, and the government is also able to take a greater risk in funding these tech entrepreneurs, because it is important that the scenario should not be similar which happened in the 1960s and the 70s, when our IITs produced the best graduates in the world and the H-1B visa took the maximum pie out of them. So if we are able to bring in the rupee capital, invest in them and allow them to scale up in India and bring the laurels of their success in India, should be important. Because let's understand, Flipkart was sold for 20 billion, but we only got 2 billion out of it. So these are some of the few points which I said that which I believe and I wanted to share with you. It's a very good platform. It has been a great learning for me, and I have noted most of the points which many of the CEOs have taken. I think if we all come together, we'll make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garg. I think you made some brilliant points, and that's the beauty of, I think, the interaction between industry and government, because we find that many of the questions we would ask, the data policy, the whole distribution of work to entrepreneurs and startups. I mentioned earlier the work from home enablement. And of course, I think Shri Rajiv Kumar mentioned very rightly about data and cybersecurity. I think all these are already top of the mind of the government. There are probably 175 questions. So I will do you the injustice of not taking up the questions, but please feel free to send your questions to AIMA, and I'm requesting AIMA to send them to me, and I'll make sure you get an answer. But I will ask one question to government, since Shri Rajiv Kumar or Dr. Garg would like to answer it. And the question is about the finance sector. As all of us know, the financial sector is the heart and the veins of the economy. And I mean, there have been recent reports that entities like HDFC, ICICI, Fino Payment Bank, which is operating in the rural sector, have been outstanding examples of IT and digital. But when can we look forward to a day when Ministry of IT will work with the Ministry of Finance and make sure that every Indian is financially enabled? Any thoughts on that from the government?
Well, very good question, Ganesh. Probably begs equally, difficult answer, so to say. Yes, there have been efforts since I think this government began its previous term, in 2014 with the with the financial inclusion program and opening up of Jan-Dhan accounts. So that's step number one. Payments bank, step number two. Postal payment banks, a massive thrust towards inclusion. And in the current COVID scenario, the dispersal of funds and cash has happened despite lockdown by the postal workers who did routes in the villages and disbursed money, and also utilizing the Aadhaar payment bridge. So that is one which has actually allowed cash to go to the hands of rural people who are still, dealing with the cash. But yes, we do have, I think the answer lies in that currently what we are looking as household to be financially included. Probably we are nearing that, but I think the proof of pudding will be the ultimate would be then when each individual, each adult gets their own account. So that is what is something which we should strive at, and perhaps that is something which will happen over a period of time. Maybe we have had a few slowdowns because of the NBFC crisis, perhaps. So we lost a bit of momentum in the last 6 to 8 months. That has slowed down our progress. But yes, there are a number of programs being run by various organizations to digitally enable people. And that is where actually the need or the value unlocks for having an independent account or financially being included. So things are moving. Perhaps we don't have a time frame, but we work very closely with Finance Ministry, and that is, I think, one of the very important milestones that India needs to achieve in a quicker time frame.
To add on to what Sir has said, let's understand that India is a rural example where we have closed a platform called the Unified Payment Interface. That's a global best practice that is there. Every country, including US, is trying to create a similar platform or take advantage of our own platform. The challenge lies that whether we are able to provide this platform to the world or not. But the important point is, let's look that UPI is a digital platform promoted by MeitY, adopted seamlessly by the RBI and the financial system, and it has got the power to do the financial inclusion, the microfinancing, financing to the last mile, breaking the whole system of middleman theory has been actually being questioned by the UPI. And I'm sure that with the huge fintech ecosystem that is growing in the country, and they taking advantage of the open API system of UPI, the financial inclusion will happen sooner than later.
Thank you, Dr. Garg. Thank you, Rajiv ji. I think it's very nice. And I'm hoping that the Ministry of IT will take small stakes in all the new Atmanirbhar initiatives that you're actually enabling through your accelerators and centers of excellence. And maybe you will make enough money on that little percentage to fund all the problems of India. So let's hope by $1 trillion digital economy will make that happen. We are extremely out of time, ladies and gentlemen. I repeat my offer that if you have any questions, do send them to AIMA, and I'm sure Sanjay will send them to me, and I will get you answers from the panel. But a real privilege for us to have Shri Rajiv Kumar, Anu from McKinsey, such brilliant CEOs, and of course, Dr. Garg, be with us today. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your support to AIMA, and have a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.